I want to welcome the panelists first and foremost for joining us today. Uh, I want to welcome all the participants who are joining us from different parts of the world. If you don't mind, you can type into the chat window, where are you joining from? Which part of the world are you joining from? Okay, just go ahead and type it so we'll get a sense of who is from where and how many cities are represented from around the world here. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite the panelists to very briefly introduce yourselves. Let's say just a couple of things about your respective backgrounds, and then we can begin the conversation. Okay, so may I start with Dr. Rashmi Kulkarni? You had to unmute yourself first.
Namaste everyone. I'm Rashmi Kulkarni, based in Doha, Qatar. So I have a PhD in molecular genetics and a master's in microbiology. That's my background. I worked on cancer biology for several years, but now I'm an entrepreneur in hydroponics and I'm very interested in nutrition. So I also do educational programs to help people learn more about our gut microbiome and how food can be used as medicine. Thank you.
Yeah, and then getting to know Rashmi ji, I had to learn what hydroponics really means. Most of you probably have not heard about it. Maybe she will explain during her turn to speak here. Okay, Praful Krishna. I don't know if you're Dr. Praful Krishna, but go ahead, please.
No, I'm not as qualified. I'm just Praful. Thank you for inviting me here. And I'm just looking at the list of chats. Welcome to everyone. This is such a great representation of Indian diaspora and Indians from around the world. It's amazing. So I'm Praful. I'm originally from Varanasi, but these days I live in San Francisco. I work in like every other person in San Francisco in artificial intelligence. I have my own company, and we basically use artificial intelligence for Fortune 500 doing stuff. But that's my day job. My real job is to help out wherever I can with the Global Indian Scientists and Technocrats Forum. And Aahaar Kranti is very close to my heart. Also about making India an AI giant one way or the other. So I'm really happy to be here. And thank you for inviting me.
Terrific. And last but not the least, Dr. Yaloji Mirajkar, whom I have known for a long time now and have had the pleasure of working very closely with. Yaloji, please go ahead.
Namaste. I am here in a different show today. Every time I used to be on the other side of the screen, meaning I used to be an audience, and being part of Hindu University of America, I have come across so many speakers, so many people in all capacities. About myself, I am originally from Shimoga in Karnataka. Did my studies in Mysore, as well as Indian Institute of Science. My PhD is about physical chemistry, solution, colloid, and surface chemistry. Worked in Colgate Palmolive company in global R&D for almost 25 years, and I am now retired. Primarily, I'm spending time with Hindu University, Dharma Civilization Foundation, as well as GIST. Currently, I have the responsibility of convener for GIST forum in USA. Thank you, Kalyanji.
Okay, wonderful. So Yalaji, you have introduced this term GIST forum. Now you're going to have to explain what GIST is to our audience.
Okay, wonderful. So GIST acronym stands for Global Indian Scientists and Technocrats Forum. The category, what I said, they could be either in India or outside Bharat, outside India. And the whole idea is how can the expertise plus our time, talent, and probably treasure could be given back to Bharat for the development of Bharat. When I say development, initially we were thinking about the rural, but now it looks like India is in the growth pattern so fast and so rapidly that the development of not only the rural, but also the frontier science. unlike any philosophy, Indian philosophy or the Hindu philosophy is, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So whatever the solutions, frontier research, it comes, it will be not only for India, but also for rest of the world. Look at recently the vaccine situation. I don't have to elaborate that here, but it is for some other day. But this is what GIST is all about.
Okay, fantastic. So let us move on to the main theme of today, Aahaar Kranti, food as medicine. So who is going to begin the conversation here? Yalaji, is it you?
That is correct. I am going to begin. But just before beginning, I need to acknowledge, we all need to acknowledge the situation in Bharat. Our heart goes to so many people, so many families who are impacted. Our heart also goes to so many people, the medical profession, non-medical profession. In spite of facing the danger, getting contaminated, people are working for providing relief, doing anything to any extent that is possible for them to do. They understand the restrictions, they understand the limitations, but still, without thinking about the potential danger, they prepare themselves and also trying to help. Now, today, with the COVID situation, in the first round of COVID, while the whole world was impacted significantly, India also was impacted, but considering the population, the density, and the lesser numbers in all the dimensions, the whole world started looking into India in a slightly different fashion. Their curiosity arose to larger extent because the numbers by any means was not at their expectations. In fact, right in the month of February, I believe, end of February or first week of March, there was an article in BBC, and what it said is that considering the so thick density, it is going to be a chaotic situation in India, how it is going to be monitored. But to their surprise, the numbers were not that bad. And they started looking into, it is something to do with the immunity, and therefore, what is that India has done in the past are doing in the present, because of which general immunity in India is much, much, much better compared to anywhere else. So that curiosity has led to do or initiate a lot of research projects, researches, everything. However, the numbers that are coming in the second wave are a little bit disturbing. It has shaken the basic foundation in Bharat. I just want to remind that the numbers are bad, but still it is in reasonable range. That doesn't mean that we should take it lightly. No, we have to take it very, very importantly. And we have to give priority at most to this one. So overall, the question is that in the future, if a pandemic of this kind, or anything that can shake the whole humanity, can we prepare? Health-wise, I believe there is an option, and that is our food. Can we treat food as our friend? And if we treat it as a friend, then we'll be conscious about the positive benefits of the food as well as the negative impact of the food on our own body, because our body is not machine. So obviously we need to understand a little bit more about it. So immunity means we need to understand ourselves and therefore how our system would be able to help. Now, if we consider food as our friend, that also means food as medicine. So how can we stay closely with good food, stay away from the bad foods? Many times it is not just the food items. It is the way it is made, the concoction or a food, the final dish. How do you prepare? How do you consume? How much you need to consume? If you take the global standards today, they say that per day, this is the amount of calories, this is the amount of carbohydrate, this is the amount of protein, fat, probably some micronutrients. Is it really true? The global standards is only for a person who also consumes non-vegetarian products. But there are 1/3 of India or even more are not necessarily consuming any of these meat products. So what is the alternative for them? The second one is international level, the nutrition, it only says per day, this is what your consumption is. But we know that there are non-compatible food items. Because of it, sometimes we have little ailments that is experienced and visible as well. But in Ayurveda, there are very clear indications and informations about Viruddha Aahaar, that is non-compatible foods. What if you know, you would be able to have a better control on your diet. So in short, without elaborating more, Aahaar Kranti is an awareness, a movement to increase awareness to that an extent that as an individual, as a family person, in any other way, we can practice in our daily life to get the most out of it. Food eaten as medicine because it is our friend. With that note, Kalyanji, I will stop.
Okay, thank you, Yalaji. So now the next speaker is Dr. Rashmi Kulkarni. She will, I think, set up the conceptual foundations of Aahaar Kranti. And her talk may be slightly technical, but let's listen to her and try to assimilate what she has to say. Over to you, Dr. Rashmi Kulkarni.
Thank you, Kalyanji. I'll try to make it as simple as possible. Let's see if I can do that successfully. It's really nice to see the diversity of where everybody is. It's especially important. I'll get to that soon. So I'll be talking about how food can be medicine. When we think about food, we just think about what we eat. There are so many other aspects to food and nutrition that we never think about. So I'll try and introduce some of these things today. Just taking a look at our body itself. When we think about who we are not just our visible organs. We are also made of the invisible microorganisms within us that makes our entire body. That is who we are. So what are these microorganisms? It's called a microbiome. What is a microbiome? A microbiome consists of several different forms of microorganisms like bacteria, viruses, protozoa, fungi. These are just technical terms. But what this means is the microbiome is the collective genome or DNA or RNA of all of these germs that live inside and on our bodies. And I'll get to why that is important. Although this slide has a lot of information here, the important points to see are that there are 10 times as many microorganisms as there are cells in our body. So if we have 1 trillion cells, we have 10 to 100 trillion microorganisms that have colonized our bodies. There are more than 10,000 different species of microorganisms that are just known. There might be even more. And why are these numbers important? These are important because if we look at the number of genes, how we function is dependent on our genes. The number of microbial genes inside us are 100 times more than our genes. And this is what makes each individual different from one another. It is not our own genetic makeup, but it is the microorganisms that live within us that makes us who we are and very different from each other. So what exactly is this? If we actually look at the numbers, we are only 10% human, considering the numbers. But if we look at the function of our cells and the microbial cells that are present in our body, it is less than 1% of what our cells, it is less than 1% what we actually do. 99% of the functions are done by the microbiome. I'll get to that in greater details as to what the microbiome is. So let's see what is the source of the microbiome. Where does it come from? Where do all these germs come from in our body? And why we should care about it. So we keep accumulating these germs over time. It is dependent on how we are born, how, what is the nutrition that we receive, whether that's breastfeeding or formula feeding, and what food we eat. This the microbial collection keeps on accumulating right from birth, and it keeps changing and becoming more and more and more diverse in adulthood. And this is the stage where it is quite stable and very, very diverse. The diversity is extremely important. In the elderly, this diversity starts getting lower and lower, and that is the cause of several health issues. So what the microbiome does is, so these are the germs that are constantly being introduced from the environment, from the food we eat. So what do they do? In newborns, when there are a few microorganisms that are introduced at birth and after birth through food, through the environment, what they do is they are constantly training our immune system. They are teaching our immune system what is good for them and what is harmful. And this training keeps happening over time till the immune system is developed uh, in adulthood. So 70% of our immune cells are present in the gut. These microbes are extremely important in the development of our immunity. And when this training happens in a normal way, whenever there are pathogenic microorganisms trying to invade, like COVID in this case, they will not be very successful if we have very good training from our own microbiome. This is just a representation of the gut cells. This is how they look like in a baby uh, at the time of birth. And these cells, the gut cells, keep developing over time. The immune system gets better and better and better because of exposure of these microorganisms that live within us. It's a very harmonious relationship that we need to nurture. As I mentioned before, the gut is the largest immune organ in our body, and we have to really take care of this organ in order to have the kind of immunity we need to defeat all of these diseases. So, just a fun fact for a break in between, the surfaces that we think are dirty and we are constantly cleaning in our house are not the ones that are actually very dirty. These are some of the surfaces that are the dirtiest in the house. There are 200 times more fecal bacteria on an average cutting board that cuts meat than there are on a toilet seat. The dirtiest thing in the house is the kitchen sponge. But what we do instead is we are trying to get rid of all of the microorganisms using surface disinfectants, antibiotic treatments, antibacterial hand washes, everything that is antimicrobial. These are just some examples of what we use in our daily lives. We are just trying to get rid of all of these. And what that does is we don't have any exposure to microorganisms that will form our microbiome. So if this happens, what colonizes us is very harmful microorganisms instead. So this is very, very bad for our immune system and very, very bad for our health. In rural areas where people do not do any of these, the immune system has a very good chance of developing normally. And they probably have much better microbiomes than people who live in urban, sterile areas. Where do we get a healthier microbiome? Kids playing outside or kids playing at home in a sterile environment? These are some of the things that we need to give extreme importance to and really think about this in terms of our long term health. So what do these microorganisms do? If they are training our immune system, if they do a very good job, if we have a very nice collection of these microorganisms, we do not have a problem with immunity. But what happens when we do not have a good microbiome? These are the things a poor diet can cause, like things like gluten, salt, omega 6, saturated fats, artificial sweeteners, refined sugar, red meat, and things like that. These poor choices of food cause inflammation in the gut because these are not very friendly for the microbiome. On the other hand, phytonutrients with a plant-based diet that is very, very diverse help prevent this process. So what is dysbiosis? Dysbiosis meaning it means a disturbed biological system. What happens when the microbiome is not healthy? It can lead to either dysbiosis or gut inflammation or swelling of the gut. And these are the causes of a wide variety of diseases, including allergy, autoimmune diseases, cancer, infections, how easily we can get infections, diabetes, kidney disease, you name it. There are all the diseases that are chronic are all linked to the gut microbiome. Okay, so this is an example. This looks scary, psychobiome. What that means is researchers have actually sequenced something called a psychobiome. There are specific signatures of gut bacteria in diseases that have a neurological origin. For example, anxiety, depression, OCD. These are not diseases, but these are reactions of our body or our brain in response to chemicals that are produced by our gut bacteria. So researchers have actually sequenced these microorganisms from people suffering from these disorders, and there are clear signatures that can be correlated to each of these disorders. So there's a general term given to this kind of a gut microbiome that's called a psychobiome. Here, what I've shown is our gut bacteria or the gut microorganisms produce harmful chemicals that affect our mood or a lot of things or behavior by directly affecting our brain. And this is the cause of majority of psychological or psychiatric disorders. So if we manage to keep our gut bacteria healthy, we will have a much better response. If we look at some of the tenets of Ayurveda, what we see here is it is stated by current research that the microbiome has an effect on all of the systems in our body, including the hematological, central nervous system, immune system, gastrointestinal, cardiovascular, endocrine. And what it does is it does that by supporting immunity, by supporting the digestive fire or Agni, and also by reducing the amount of toxins or undigested matter, because these are the microorganisms that help us digest our food properly. There are many nutrients that we are not, our cells are not able to assimilate. We can do that only with the help of these microorganisms. So in this way, the microbiome affects directly our mind, the body type, all the bodily tissues, and the kind of metabolic waste that is produced in our body. According to the tenets of Ayurveda, there are different times of the day when we should eat. This is an Ayurvedic clock that's represented here. And the tenets clearly state that during the morning, we have a very different metabolic state where after dawn to 10 a.m., we should eat lightly because this is called a Kaf Pradhan Kal. So we have not really properly woken up. The metabolism is not yet ignited, or the Agni is not ignited. And the afternoon is called the Pitta Pradhan Kal. What that means is the digestive fire is now very active. It's the metabolism is high, and this is the time when we should have our heaviest meal. After that, what happens is from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. is called a Vata Pradhan Kal, where again it starts, the metabolism starts going down, and this is where the last meal should be consumed before dusk. It's very specific as to what kinds of food can be consumed during these times because of a different metabolic state to be able to digest the food that we eat properly. Now, if we look at the scientific basis of this, by scientific, I mean by current research, if we look at the circadian rhythm or the sleep wake cycles in our body and how that correlates with nutrition and our microbiome, what we can see here is our brain is going from an active state to an inactive state. All this is day one. If we consider this as day one, it keeps cycling between sleep and wake cycles. So when we have sunlight, our brain is most active, and then it becomes inactive. This keeps happening over time. I've drawn a representation of microorganisms present in the gut. So these are the different kinds of microorganisms that are present in the gut during daytime at dawn. But by the time the sun sets, the kind of microorganisms present in our gut change over time. They also have their own circadian rhythm. They also respond to the hormones that we produce, and they also respond to the food intake. We have very different microorganisms during the day and a different concentration of these microorganisms at night. And these changes keep repeating over time. So this is when Ayurveda states that we should be eating or consuming all our food between sunlight till sunrise till sunset. What happens is the metabolism is very much in sync with the activity of our brain. It's very much in sync with the changing microorganisms. It's most active when there are microorganisms in our gut that can digest this food. And when these microorganisms cannot digest the food, the metabolic activity is also in sync. If we keep doing it perfectly over and over, we have this very in sync model where the brain is going from sleep and wake cycles. The microorganisms are cycling in the same pattern, and the metabolic rate is also cycling in the same pattern. What happens with this, if we follow the time and the kind of foods that we are supposed to eat during these times, it leads to good health because nothing is going wrong here. Now, I want to show what happens when we disturb this model. What we tend to do, most people tend to do, is they start eating when there's beginning of sunlight, and the last meal is somewhere close to the middle of the fasting phase. It is much later after sunset. What that does is these microorganisms are not equipped to digest this food. Now there's so much of a mismatch between the microorganisms and the food that is in the gut. What that does to the body is they are out of sync. And if we keep doing this over and over, the microorganisms on day N are unrecognizable. They are not the optimum microorganisms that we should be having because we have this combination of everything out of sync. The brain is in a different sleep wake cycle. The microorganisms are not what they are supposed to be, and the metabolism is completely off. So here we had some undigested food. Here we have even more undigested food. And as we go on, continuing this pattern, it keeps accumulating, and we have a lot of toxic products accumulating in our body, a lot of undigested material. And what happens with that is these microorganisms that are now completely different from a normal microbiome cause a weakened immune system because these are not beneficial microorganisms. There might be even harmful microorganisms. And now they are teaching our body that we are normal. So our immune system doesn't recognize them as foreign. They also produce metabolites that are harmful for our body. And additionally, the food is undigested. So what the combination of these does is we are not getting the nutrients that are required for our normal functioning of our body. And we are also accumulating harmful metabolites. We don't have the ability to fight infections the way we were supposed to. And this will definitely lead to some kind of chronic disease or serious infections. This is just a model showing what happens. So we have good bacteria or good microorganisms in our body. There are neutral microorganisms, there are bad. So there are these endogenous factors like who we are made of, our DNA, our immune status, if we have any other genetic diseases or comorbidities. But there are these exogenous factors that affect the composition of these microorganisms inside our body. Some of them are climate, occupation, stress, sedentariness. But two of the most important factors are excessive hygiene, which do not allow a normal microbiome to form, and poor nutrition. What happens here is there's an imbalance and there's too much of the bad microorganisms being accumulated in our body. And this imbalance is the root cause of several chronic diseases and infections. So again, this was a time-based diet or nutrition. Ayurveda also states that diet should be seasonal. There should be a seasonal consumption of food. And our traditional diet, if we look at the Indian diet, it just 2 generations ago, uh, our ancestors were eating food that was very, very specific for all of these seasons. And that there was a reason behind that, because our metabolism tends to be completely different in each of these seasons. So the food was highly suited to that. But what has happened now is because of availability of all kinds of food 24/7, 365 days a year, there is no such division between seasonal consumption. Everything is consumed throughout the year, and we have lost the knowledge of what we should be eating in a particular season. It is also important to eat what is grown locally, because you are constantly exposed to the pollen or that kind of food where you grow up. So we evolve with the land. These are the important things that we should consider when we are thinking about how we eat food or what we should eat. I'm sorry, it's taking time to go to the next slide. So this is a pyramid showing health based on nutrition. So this is a model drawn according to Ayurveda. What Ayurveda states is the aim is to maintain the health of a person in such a way that no diseases manifest. It also aims to cure all diseases, not just treat the symptoms, cure them completely by using nutrition as food. So if we look at the bottom of the pyramid, where most people should be ideally, this is a kind of food that is eaten in a timely manner, seasonally, and food that gives us all kinds of nutrients. It is a very diverse diet that we eat. What happens when we do that is we are preventing illness. As soon as there's an imbalance in this, we start changing the lifestyle and food choices. It goes into the disease category where treatment is needed. So if we look at what our microbiome does is it helps us extract the right nutrition. There are many vitamins and metabolites that we cannot make on our own, that our body needs to function properly. The microorganisms help us digest all of that and provide all of these nutrients to our body. So we need to give extra attention to how we develop our microbiome, and we build it right from birth, and we are constantly building a good microbiome. So I'll just focus on what food does. That's the second aspect. So when we talk about food, what does a balanced diet mean? So balanced nutrition is a diet that gives our body all of the nutrients that it needs and nothing in excess. That is how we make sure that all our cells and all our tissues and all our organs are functioning appropriately. So we have macronutrients and micronutrients that are required, as everyone knows, good carbohydrates, healthy fats, proteins, and in micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals. In a nutritionally balanced diet, there would be good carbohydrates and, very importantly, fiber, which is excellent for a good microbiome. They provide energy to our body. Proteins provide the building blocks and help in growth. Fats are very important for all the cell membranes as well as the nervous system. Vitamins help with the cellular function and several other aspects. Minerals are also required for growth and overall health. So, why are these nutrients important? These nutrients are very important because they will keep our body functioning like a well oiled machine. And it is important to eat a balanced diet that is very colorful, that includes all of these phytonutrients. Phytonutrients meaning they come from plants or or fruits and vegetables. It is important to include all of these colors in our daily diet because we get these vitamins, minerals on a daily basis. Majority of the vitamins are water soluble, which means we need to consume them on a regular basis in order to have a good amount. And if we do that, the effect on our health is, the important point here is we reduce the risk of a lot of chronic diseases and we improve overall health. So, in a nutritionally balanced diet, when we have the right amount, it will help us grow and stay active. It will keep us free of all diseases. It improves cognition and motor function. And overall, it helps maintain a healthy gut because a good microbiome needs a very balanced, healthy, and a diverse diet, just like the traditional Indian diet, which is very diverse and colorful. A special mention to spices here because they are not thought about being a part of required nutrients. But what they do, it's very special. They are the highlight of Indian cuisine. And complex combinations of these spices are very important for providing a wide variety of bioactive compounds that not only help us digest our food, but they also boost our immunity. Some of them keep our blood sugar in check. They fight inflammation and reduce cellular damage. They are good for heart health. They are good for pain relief. And these also reduce foodborne illnesses by acting as food preservatives. They help in preventing allergies, asthma, and other respiratory issues. So these are star performers that are used in minute quantities, but they do a lot additionally apart from the basic balanced diet that we have. So the consequences of not having a poor, not eating a good meal or a diet is, as I mentioned before, stunting and wasting in children, which is very, very common in the children below 5 in India. Obesity and overweight without proper growth and development, increased risk of diseases that are chronic, reduced brain function, increased risk of bone disorders, autoimmune diseases, eating disorders, non alcoholic fatty liver disease, a weak immune system, poor dental health, poor wound healing. And this is just a brief mention of what can actually happen. So, nutrition is the most powerful tool we have where we can use food as medicine. It's a very simple thing. We already have food if we make the right choices. Our nutrition is the single most important thing, and it is in our control that we can do for our health and well being. A healthy nutrition is much more important than any medicines prescribed by any doctor. It is one of the most powerful tools to alter or reverse even chronic diseases. It's never too late to change the dietary patterns. The consequences of eating processed or junk food is that these foods are extremely low in nutritive value. They are recently being called even as food stuff and not being real food because they provide empty calories. And they also lack fiber, which is extremely important for good health and for a good microbiome. And they cause again a wide variety of problems that are associated with poor nutrition, including obesity and loss of brain function, proper brain function, anxiety, depression, worse appetite and digestion, increased risk of several forms of diseases, general poor quality of life, and poor gut health. How do we avoid processed food? In order to avoid this, there are a few things that we can do. If we drink enough water, eat more protein, if we know when we are likely to crave, we can eat healthier food before that. We can plan our meals. If there is extreme hunger, that will definitely lead to bad choices of food. We can reduce our stress, get enough sleep, try to eat more nutritious meals by changing uh, very slowly. There should be mindful eating. If we are aware of what we are eating, it's very likely that it will be healthy. And we can change our diet gradually to a healthy one. We are absolutely what we eat, because it all depends. Our appearance, our mood are dependent on what we eat. If we eat bad, we look bad, we feel bad. If we have a good balanced diet, we will have better mental and physical health. We will eat good, we will look good, and we will absolutely feel good. The long term benefits of healthy eating are high energy, better memory, strong bone, joints, and teeth, absolutely better quality of life, longer life, and a lower risk of all of these chronic diseases. I cannot highlight these more. I've mentioned it already several times, but this is an extremely important point, and I need to drive this message home. Better nutrition is the greatest investment you can make in your life, because our health is our most precious treasure, and we need to nourish ourselves with optimum nutrition. And we need to use the positive contribution of our elders, our previous generations who knew much more than us. We need to focus on a more traditional, colorful, very diverse diet with different flours, a wide variety of fruits and vegetables, and micronutrients and spices. The doctor should emphasize more on optimum nutrition. Food is the best medicine to ward away most diseases. If we do not use food as medicine, medicine can become our food, as we are seeing for many people now. And what we think is that, oh, when we are much older, we will have all of these chronic diseases. But what most people don't think about is these chronic diseases actually start accumulating from childhood. If we look at heart disease, fatty streaks start accumulating in the arteries in very young children. It can even start from infancy. It is only much later that we can start seeing these symptoms, but the disease is already manifesting. So we need to invest well in our long term health with optimum nutrition. So when we think about food and when we think about changing our diet, we think that, oh, it's so difficult to, change our diet and start eating healthy. And the reason for that is we are not in control. Who is controlling what we eat is this population that lives inside the gut. They are, most of them are bacteria. And this is a history that we build up over time, right from birth. If we keep eating unhealthy and we have an unhealthy microbiome, they will crave unhealthy food, and they will make us want and crave that same kind of food all the time. That is why it is very difficult to change our diet, and it needs to be done in a slow, gradual manner. But it can be done. So I would like to end just with this note that our nutrition is a calculated risk that we take on our long-term health. So let's do the math. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great, terrific, Rashmi. That was a wonderful presentation. Iloji, you have a couple of remarks. Rashmi, I want to also point out, somebody was saying, can you put up this slide on the seasonal variations of nutrition?
Sure, I'll do that.
Just for once, a couple,
Yeah,
10 seconds.
as Rashmiji is going to pull that slide out, what I said in the beginning is food is our friend. Obviously, we have choices to make what we eat. Now, think of it that microbiomes are also our friends. So if we take care of them, and they will stay with us. If not, they will run away. So our job is to keep them as friends means we have to follow some habits of eating good, nutritious food and at times that is relevant. So I just wanted to mention that food is our friend, so is also microbiomes. So let us take care of it.
Okay, great. Yalaji, thank you.
Okay, so I have the slide here.
Yes, please. You can close the slide. You can stop sharing. We'll go to the next speaker. But before we go to Praful Krishnaji, I want to ask a question. Okay, to the panelists. I mean, listening to this, one of the thought that occurs to me, but I'm sure it occurs for others too, which is if we have been living for so long in our lives without any food discipline, say, can we still change and will it still make a difference? So that's the question. Okay. And Rashmiji, you want to answer that question?
Yes, I would like to answer this. There's an very interesting study that I wanted to highlight is that there was a paper published last year where it was shown in that study that the participants who went on a meat and cheese heavy diet, it took only 3 days to change their microbiome to have markers of cardiovascular disease. But when people were in the other group where they switched to a plant-based diet, which was much healthier, there was no difference because it takes up to a year to change the gut microbiome. To reverse the damage, but it has to be done and it can be done. It takes much longer to repair it than to damage. Damage happens instantaneously. 3 days is enough.
So if we change our food habits and so on, it'll take a year to kind of for the microbiome to change.
Yes, it depends completely on where we start from. And unless we start taking the first baby steps, we are not going to reach anywhere. If we look at this good health as a mountain, unless we start climbing, we will still remain on the ground. Anywhere we are on the mountain is much better than being on the ground.
Right. Some of us are in the ditch, not even in the ground. All right, Prafullaji, you're gonna speak about Aahaar Kranti as an initiative, and what your plans are, what you're trying to
Absolutely. And
create, and so on. Yeah, please go ahead, please.
so obviously it's very difficult to follow such an interesting presentation by Rashmiji, but we'll try our best. And before I start though, I want to challenge everyone who is attending today, right? Yoloji talked about how food is important as a source of immunity. Rashmi ji gave it not in terms of folklore that we have been hearing from our grandmothers ever since we're children, but in terms of very explicit scientific terms on why that is true and why food is Aahaar is Aushadhi, as we call as you say in Hindi, and why food is medicine, right? So I want to challenge everyone to think about it, that where are you on that, as Kalyanji said, in the ditch or on top of the mountain in terms of your nutritional habit, in terms of your own lifestyle? And then this is a thought that started in our mind that, look, what do we do to make sure that people have begun climbing this mountain on a nationwide basis, or not even just nation, but all around the globe? And that is Aahaar Kranti. I will share some slides, but that is the basic ideas. That's the basic thing that we are going after. Let's see. Can you see my slide? Just let me know if you don't. Great. That simple thought, right? That simple thought combined with this question, that thanks to all the efforts that the government of India has already put in, this people have already put in, the nation has already put in over the last 50 years, we are producing way more than what we need to consume as a nation. So when we talk about when we think about, there's a mismatch in terms of what we eat and what we're producing. It's not the lack of resources. It's not the lack of agricultural productivity. It's just the awareness. And we talked about this, right? In general, the Indian population is very starch heavy. This is a study by the Lancet Commission that you see on screen, where 100% is where everyone should be. Now, take it with a pinch of salt, because no pun intended, because it's a Western-oriented recommendation pattern. But still, the overall takeaway from this study is that we are just eating too much starch, less of other kind of food groups. That's undeniable. If you go into, Kalanji, you talked about, how the nutritional risk is actually showing up on all the numbers that we are seeing, right? So India, obviously, as we are developing as a country, we are controlling the number of deaths. Infectious disease, healthcare, longevity is increasing, but what's also increasing is the death due to dietary risks. It's already the fourth highest factor. It is growing. It will very soon become top 3. And the share of the deaths within that is growing much faster. So yes, we are living longer. We are healthier as a nation, but this is a big concern and should be a concern already. And so these are the thoughts that came together, right? With thanks to people like Rashmiji, we know on a very scientific basis. We don't have to just believe it as a hearsay or what old-fashioned people say. Nothing like that. It's very modern, very scientific. That what we eat determines so many aspects of our health, starting from gut microbiome, obesity, and everything. We are seeing the numbers play out on the national level. How do we make sure that we take preventive things today? India has had this history of making a nationwide campaign successful, right? I mean, there was a fantasy when India became independent. People thought, oh, India can never feed itself. It's not a viable country on its own. We, of course, proved that wrong in the 60s. Then we said that, agriculture and dairy can be a means of economic improvement as well. It's not just, feeding. Now let's just use that for a better economy. And now we are saying, can we have this Aahaar revolution where we can just focus on the better awareness of nutrition to save lives, to improve health, and of course, the ancillary effects of the economy. Plant-based diet, as we just saw, is just a low-hanging fruit, but obviously the whole spectrum is very different. It includes all aspects, all lifestyles, and it's different for everyone. Like a Maharashtrian person will have a different response to this than a UP person versus a Tamil person, right? And it's very different for, we have like 127 agri-climatic geographic zones within India. So there's 127 different answers to this, but we all has to start with one simple thing. Can we have better awareness for the positive nutrition? Not just in India. And if you think about it, India is in such an interesting stage of development that, if we do it right in India, it is a role model that can be set for everyone, not just emerging world. And the more I think about it, the more we work about it. The problem is in here in the United States, in Silicon Valley, it's there in every developed country. And this can be a forum for another way India can be a Vishwaguru. Great at a high level. And obviously I can talk for hours on how we do it, but we have to start somewhere. What we think is that, the best way to start to create maximum leverage, to create maximum momentum in the shortest amount of effort is to start with students. So train the teachers, train the students, the message goes to their families, and eventually it goes to the society. We are hoping to start with better awareness. We're hoping that will relate into better nutrition and eventually the better agricultural practices, because look, this has to be supplied from somewhere. All the fruit and vegetables, maybe hydroponics is the answer, maybe horticulture is the answer, maybe getting away to from a vicious cycle of grain-oriented agricultural patterns to a virtuous cycle horticulture, herbiculture, pisciculture, other things which maybe can help our farmers as well. So how do we start? As I already talked about the audience, we talked about the objective. We are focusing on the NGOs, NGO partners, and reaching out to the schools and Anganwadi in India. Government is already becoming, we had a thought of government will be a second stage. Government is already becoming very interested. As some of you must know, we had a very successful launch event just last month where Dr. Harshvardhan was there from Department of Science and Technology, and so many different people from the heads of different departments from different ministries were there to extend their hand. And eventually, obviously, we have to include the private sector as well. We're starting with English. I'm talking in English, but that's not gonna cut it. Everything that we're doing is actually bilingual, so English and in Hindi, but we have to reach very quickly to the vernacular languages as well. And I can go on and on. Similarly for the content, right? We are starting, as Rashmiji mentioned, or Yeliji mentioned, that we're starting with the content for teachers and trainers, but that we need to do it for the students and individuals. And to take it to a point where everyone can start their mini Kranti wherever they are. In your house, in your office, in your school, we need to have the content to a point where you can just copy and start, a Kranti in your own micro system. Format, of course, we are starting with online, has to be physical, and India is mobile first. In India, is like 85% penetrated with mobile. So 85% people in India have mobile phones. So all that needs to come up. I will we can talk more about it, but this is just a chart that we have put up with not only the macronutrients for every common fruits, vegetables, or spice that we use, so about 200 of them, but also the Ayurvedic aspects of it, so that whichever way you relate with this information, whichever way you want to believe in Western science, you want to believe in Indian science, you want to believe in both, it's available to you. And you can go on our website, aahaarkranti.org, to find more about this chart. I'll just end here. The idea, I'm sorry if you don't know Hindi, I'll just translate these to you. If we get Aahaar Kranti right, not only are we making Bharat Ayushman, long living, we are making it Vidwan, because there's a strong correlation, as Rashmiji said, and as others have said, there's a strong correlation between what you eat and cognitive outcome as well, in school outcome, academic performance and everything. We are making it Krishi Pradhan, like look, 2 in 5 of Indians are still employed in agriculture. So we have to focus on that. We have to focus on our farmers. But if we get this right, we are creating a lot of opportunities for food processing industry. So we are creating economic opportunity as well. We're making Bharat Samriddh. We have to return to our traditional knowledge on nutrition. So which comes in the form of, like, this is all scientific. This is not like a Dadi Ma ke kahaniya, right? This is all scientific now. We need the culinary diversity. We need to eat for the microbiomes, for the reasons we talked about. We need to eat what we grew up with, right? The species evolves with the land. And Ayurveda is part of it. Ayurveda is not the Vaidya giving you an Aushadhi for treating your disease. Ayurveda is a way of life for your nutrition thing, which is, again, part of it. And as I said earlier, if we get all of this right, we can make Bharat a Vishwaguru again. So I'll stop here. And if there are any questions, please feel to shoot it.
Great. Thank you for that. That was amazing. I feel like I wasn't prepared to give the introduction. That was such an amazing presentation. There was so much to it. I learned so much. I think the audience was showing it. Kalyanji, thank you for picking that up at the start. But there are a lot of questions. I have some polls also. I should have had this at the start, but maybe I can just launch this quick poll to see what is your general understanding of balanced and nutritious food. Just subjective, low, medium, high, your own knowledge. And do you consider yourself a healthy eater? Yes or no? Are we in the ditch or are we somewhere in the mountain, as Kalyanji said at the start? But we have 130 people. Thank you for joining us. We're right at 10. We have about half hour for questions. So please use the Q&A box to put in your questions. And if you want to direct it at a specific panelist, please make that clear. If you want to voice your question, maybe raise your hand. We'll see if we can get into that, but we'll take the questions written in the Q&A box first. Sumegaji asks, eating as per our genes or keto diet, we mentioned the meat and cheese diet earlier. Are these things right to do? What is right? What is wrong? How do we get into it? People do see difference when they switch to vegan or even a keto or another diet. As you said, it can change very quickly. But please, and it looked like you were typing an answer, Rashmiji, but I don't know if you ended up sending
No,
it.
no, I didn't type anything. I thought the questions would be taken up later. That's why I didn't type the answer so that everybody can hear. So if we look at all of these different diets, they may or may not suit us because we have a history of our microbiome that we have collected over time. And it totally depends on each individual. Our microbiome is like a unique fingerprint that we have. If we look at a keto diet, for example, it is a very protein heavy diet. It does not have a balance of good carbohydrates or healthy fats that we would need for our body to function properly. So it really depends on what history we have accumulated over time to know whether that will suit you. Just because a keto diet sounds cool, it might not suit everybody.
Okay, thank you for that. Raghuji asks, as a parent of autism kid, a child with autism, I'm not sure the proper terminology. I was searching for Ayurvedic solutions for the last few years. If you want to expand on that.
Yes, so one of the things that I mentioned here in the psychobiome slide is was autism and autism spectrum disorders. So there has been a lot of research on that, and there are particular signatures observed in children or people who are diagnosed with autism or autism spectrum disorders, and even ADHD. So what researchers are doing, I'm not sure what the Ayurveda treatment would be. I'm very sure there is something, because what is required here is most likely a rebalancing of the gut microbiome. That might not be the case for everybody who has this, but there has been great success in children who were given a fecal transplant, as bad as it might sound. But a fecal microbial transplant is directly transferring somebody's healthy microbiome to children who have autism so that they have immediate relief from the symptoms. So this has been very successful. I do not have that much information about what the treatment would be in Ayurveda, but I'm sure there is something. Nutritional changes definitely help in autism and autism spectrum disorders.
Interesting. We still have the poll open. Please plug that in. We have a second poll I want to put up also. Next question from Prabhatji. Dr. Kulkarni, why is eggplant or brinjal considered a negative pranic food? Is there a relationship between pranic energy and phytonutrients, the way we know it? And a lot of people, or go ahead if you want to answer that and how you want to answer that.
No, I'm really sorry. I'm a researcher and I do not have that kind of a background to even start answering that question. I need to thank our team members in Aahaar Kranti who helped with the preparation of the Ayurveda portion of it. I need to thank everybody, in fact, which I'll do in a few minutes. But I don't think I'm equipped to answer that very specific question, but we can get that information and get it across.
And so some other people were asking for slides and other details. We will send a follow-up email with selected links and the form to volunteer and support Aahaar Kranti in the follow-up if you registered. So we'll include that. We'll ask the panelists what they want to include, and we'll send that out to everyone as we go through these questions.
If I can interrupt just to say one thing. Look, Kranti is not an individual effort. Kranti comes when everyone comes together. So please join us. If we don't have the answer, we'll find it together. And you know, I saw some question where, you know, is it a Government of India initiative? It is no. It's just people like all of you. It's just we're the same people. We are just, you know, we have our day jobs. We have our other things that we are focused on. But because we are passionate about this issue in our own lives and for the country, we are coming together. So please join us to kind of pile on what Ankur was saying. And we can, I'm sure, find all the answers.
I would like to just comment something about questions that have come in the chart. There are specific recommendations, specific asks are there. Kindly recognize that we are increasing the awareness. Our efforts is to increase awareness so that once we become aware, we can also reach to the subject matter experts practicing Ayurvedists, practicing doctors, practicing dietitians, all those people. And awareness will also help them to prescribe appropriately. So in this platform today, we won't be able to give specific recommendations on any of the things. What Rashmiji mentioned is about the rainbow, something like that, where varieties of food items are important. Why? Because their composition is different and our body needs some of all, but not only one of it. And therefore, general recommendation for a general person, general diet, general consumption. However, please consult a specialist for specific recommendations. Thank you.
Great. Yes, thank you, Yeloji, for that. There were quite a few of those specific questions in there, but thank you for that broader answer to that. And I really like Prafulji's Kranti. We're doing this together. And if those specific questions, you can email those about specific stuff like that. But there's one from Padmaji, the relationship between time of meal and microbiome. That seems like an interesting intermittent fasting, food type. I don't know if that's something that you can give us some insight on.
Yes, sure. So what happens is just like our brain responds to sunlight and we make hormones depending on what time of the day it is. And our brain is more awake or asleep or not awake, depending on that. The microbiome behaves exactly in the same way. They also respond to all of these changes. And the type of microorganisms that I mentioned before are very different during the daytime when there's sunrise compared to sunset, because of play of these hormones, because of sunlight, because of the food that we eat. All of these factors are affecting the composition of the gut microbiome. So if we take a sample of the gut microbiome in the beginning of the day and if we take a sample at night, it will be very, very different. And these are the microorganisms that help us digest our food. That's why it's very important to eat in a timely manner, because at night we just do not have the microorganisms that are required to efficiently digest this food. At night, the microorganisms are mainly those that would digest things that are very difficult to digest, like fiber, which gets accumulated and it takes a much longer time to digest. These are not the ones who will digest other components of the food that we eat. So what happens if it's not done in a timely manner? It's very asynchronous and we keep getting undigested food accumulating over time. So what intermittent fasting does is it breaks the asynchrony to some extent of the accumulated, the phases that are changed in our metabolism and the microorganisms. That's why intermittent fasting is helpful, because you are again eating within that time frame of daylight. So that is the reason why it helps reset the microbiome a bit. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, no, that was interesting.
That's how, because intermittent fasting basically depends on eating only when there is daylight, not after sunset, or not very early.
Let me just add one comment to that response. Intermittent fasting. Imagine ourselves standing in front of a refrigerator, and you open, you'll find lots of items, right? Now imagine the same microbiome standing in front of open refrigerator, and there is a lot of item is there. It's going to use something, and something is always left behind. And the left behind, if it is there, it is going to decay and do all kinds of negative aspects that Rashmiji mentioned. On the other hand, think of it, the same open refrigerator, there is only a few things are available, and you have to eat. What you will do? You'll end up eating. You'll clean up the refrigerator. So think from that perspective that microbiomes can do only certain things, and we should feed to that certain extent. Otherwise, it is going to be bad for not only us, our own system as well.
So, considering the amount of interest there is on specific food items and so on, it is my understanding that when it comes to matching foods for people's types, body types, or vata, pitta, kapha, balance types, and so on, it requires a very customized kind of recommendation. It's not like a one size fits all type of recommendation. I mean, that's the impression I have about um, this particular matter. So would it be appropriate then that to say that people have to consult an appropriate expert specifically to get recommendations? I mean, we can't say brinjal is good for everybody, brinjal is bad for everybody. I think it's a very specific. Generally, it's a very specific situation, person to person. Is that a fair assessment?
That is
Yes.
true, Kalanji. That is exactly how it is. Um, One common theme that we always feel is Uttama Aahaar. What is that Uttam definition? Uttama is, I am from one geographical region, and any food items grown in that region is typically generally compatible to me for my normal standards, normal health, normal these things. But when there is a challenge, then you have to look for something else. That is what the medicine is. So that is when we need to consult experts, depending upon, is it just lack of nutrition, therefore a dietitian or a nutrition specialist can tell, but is it going to be a disease? Understand that the today's treatment of the disease in the Western world, to my understanding, is curing the symptoms, trying to bring the indicators that show less. For example, diabetes. What do? We take the insulin and try to take off excess of sugar. That's not going to cure the disease. However, the terms in Ayurveda is not curing the symptoms, isn't it? It is curing the disease itself. So using the food to maintain normalcy, and in the event it is not, then consult the expert.
So, Rashmi ji, just one more quick follow-up on that.
Yes.
I mean, the idea that maybe we were born in South India, North India, middle of India, and so on. But and Ankur was born somewhere in Southern California, I'm sure. But we're not living where we were born. We moved around. So, considering we have moved around generally, how would you connect these concepts to apply to our situation?
Yes, so it's a very, very valid question, Kalyanji, and I keep wondering about the same because I have traveled a lot. I've lived overseas for 21 years. I don't live where I was born. And the exposure that I had initially, that we should eat local because your immune system or your gut is exposed to these allergens or these pollen all the time. It's very difficult to follow if you are not living there, but what we can still do is there is so much that can help the gut microbiome. There's outdoor exposure, increased outdoor exposure, not staying indoors all the time, eating a very diverse balanced diet, like a traditional diet, eating very different kinds of flour, not just wheat flour. We have a very rich history of all kinds of different millets, different flours. So if we include all of these diversity, uh, we cannot help where we live right now because it's very hard for people to find work where they were born. There are so many factors we need to consider, but if we focus on all of these other things, it can still help to a very, very great extent. So now that we live in Qatar, I'm just giving an example. A lot of fruits and vegetables are imported from India. But what we have started doing recently is Qatar started growing locally, and we try to buy local because we are living here for quite some time, and it's much easier for that to be acceptable to our body than eating something that comes from outside. And we know it is extremely fresh. It has been harvested here. That's something that we are trying to do, eating local. At least it will help the children. So I hope
Yeah.
that has some clarity.
And that was an interesting conversation on kind of the specifics and the individual and how it changes. But then, you know, we have studies, we have so much science, we have history on this. Anitra Wetzel asked, how do you feel about the China study, right? Or these other long-term studies uncovered that when people eat animals and animal products, they turn on inflammation and disease causing factors in their cells like cancer, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes. There's so many connections that these studies have shown in different versions of them. What are your thoughts on some of those? Maybe Prafulji, if you want to.
Yeah, so I'm not so sure. I was waiting for others to chime in. Look, I'm not a scientist, but here's what I know, right? I'll give a very unrelated example to elaborate my point, right? There is a script, an ancient script written by probably 600 BC by Maharishi Kannada, who essentially talks about gravity. The 600 BC we're talking about gravity, acceleration, and force, and their equivalents. Right? These are, as you know, these are the concepts of special theory of, not actually general theory of relativity given by Einstein, probably 2,500 years later. Right? He talks about it, and I saw a video where they're claiming, look, this is the general theory of relativity was already known to Indians 2,500 years ago. Right? The point is that because Einstein published his paper in 1905, or I think general theory was 1914, but whenever, the scrutiny, the empirical analysis, the experimental analysis of the theory is very different than it was for Maharishi Kannada in 600 BC, right? So maybe the ideas were there. I think we have to use the same scientific method for whatever we are saying in terms of our own food. So I've got a lot of these studies are coming up, and I was seeing someone also ask, like, you know, I think each and everything that Rashmiji said, and because we've had this conversation before, is backed by like really good scientific studies, peer-reviewed papers, evidence-based studies that we are talking about. But we have to be careful that if we go beyond that, then we are kind of on our own. So one of the aspects of Aahaar Kranti, and as we grow, at some point we'll start doing this. We just had as I said, a manthan with Professor Tanuja Nesri, who is the head of All India Institute of Ayurveda. And she would agree with me. She said that we have to take all these classical concepts, I'm quoting her, and bring it under the contemporary evidence-based framework for that to be well accepted, for us to be able to thumb the table saying, this is what we should do, right? We are halfway there, we are not fully there. And hopefully as the Kranti continues, we will generate more opportunities for that. Does that answer the question? I thought I just took it to a tangent.
Yeah, so there's one additional observation that I suppose can be made here, which is that, you know, what has passed on from generation to generation as traditional wisdom, obviously to stand the test of the scrutiny of contemporary science needs that kind of experimental validation and study and so on. So that's it kind of goes without saying that needs to be done. But there are, at the same time, there are a couple of things that we have to keep in mind. One is perhaps the amount of research investment going into these kinds of studies is pretty low at the moment. There isn't enough infrastructure and momentum to do these types of research, and that needs to be increased.
Absolutely.
But secondly, more importantly, see, I make this point that I mean, the Ayurveda can be talked about in terms of it's a consciousness-based medical paradigm, meaning that which is sukshma, you know, is pradhana, meaning it's primary. That which is sthula is secondary. That is the Indian, the Vedic, the Hindu paradigm. And this poses particular difficulties because the scientific paradigm of today is almost exclusively focused on stula, not sukshma. It cannot even access the sukshma realm. Uh, and this poses certain unique challenges when it comes to subjecting Ayurvedic knowledge to the kinds of contemporary scientific validation. There is a paradigmatic mismatch between the two realms. We should keep that in mind, but nevertheless take certain steps and put more investment, that's for sure. And if Hindu University of America can make some strides in this in the future, I mean, I would be very, very happy to promote that.
Great. Thank you, Kalyanji, for that. We've got a...
One second. Yeah, Praful wanted to say something.
No, sorry, I just say I 100% agree with you. And I think we have had this, this is a very, very valid point. So two things I'll say, right? Yeah. Everything that you said starts with better awareness, yeah. Right? We need to be aware of what we are missing to go ahead and solve that problem. And then hopefully we'll figure out the resources, we'll figure out the way and then try to do it, right? And the second thing I'll say is partly driven by Indian doctors world over. The Western thought process is also beginning to change. And we need to contribute to that, right? Again, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, right? We need to place the traditional folk knowledge that we have through that scrutiny and start changing minds. So for example, intermittent fasting, right? Most supporters of intermittent fasting are beginning to think the Indian way, that let's prevent the diseases, not cure them. Right? And the whole idea that if your glucose is high, that's the last domino to fall. That means 12 other things have already gone in your body. And now that it's showing up in glucose, right? Let's not worry about the glucose. I mean, of course, you have to symptomatically treat it, but start somewhere earlier. So yeah, I 100% agree with what you said, Kalyanji.
Right. Yeah, thank you. So Ankur, can you show the results of the poll? Maybe
yes.
You want to, yeah.
I can share that one. We're kind of in the middle, a lot of us, understanding of nutritious food, healthy eaters, trying to get up on that mountain. I have one more poll if I can share right after that. You have a good look at that?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then this one, a little bit of maybe the impact of this presentation. As we're talking about, we want you to get involved. We're doing all this work. There's different vehicles we need to be building, but do you think this is a start in impacting your own eating habits? And did this improve your general understanding of nutrition and health? And if you click that last one, it has opened my mind and I want to learn more, we'll be sure to follow up with you. We'll follow up with everyone. You're going to get the email with the webinar recording, some links, but this just allows us to know who's really interested. And it's nice to see. So we still have 112 people on. We have a few minutes for maybe closing thoughts from our panelists as people fill in this and want to let us know how much they want to participate and the impact this had on them.
There are lots of questions we haven't taken up. Okay, I just want to acknowledge that. People are asking very specific questions like, what's your advice for muscle hypertrophy and maintaining energy levels as an athlete on a vegetarian diet? That's very, very specific, and I am afraid, as Rashmiji said, it may not be appropriate to try to give out advice on this webinar at that level of granularity. Now here's another question. Somebody is asking about specific disease conditions and so on. I think we should excuse ourselves from trying to get into those specificities of diseases and remedies and recommendations, etc., for this webinar.
Yes, I just want to mention, I'm sorry to, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, please go ahead.
No, I just wanted to mention here, because there are so many specific questions, we know each of us can relate to this. What we did today was give a glimpse of the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to know. There's so much information about each of these diseases, health conditions, and so on and so forth, that yes, there are experts available. Yes, there is nutritional information available. They just need to be reached by people directly. And we are just here to make people aware that there are these other factors also not just nutrition. There are these other factors. And then there's balanced nutrition, which we don't think of in the right way. This is just to increase awareness, and I hope that helps people in making the right choices of who they talk to about nutrition and what choices they make in their lifestyle.
Great. Yes,
Okay.
yes. I'm pretty sure Yoloji and Prafulji, maybe Prafulji, you've had some thoughts, chances at this. Maybe you want one more. I know Dr. Yoloji Mirajkar's got some closing points that I think he wants to leave us with.
So let me just speak for 30 seconds and Yoloji can close. If we were able to make you question whether you are living a healthy diet or not, I think that was biggest kind of objective of this webinar, and so we have completed it. But I would encourage you to think about not only your own family and not only yourself, but the society in general, particularly India. Because if we start pulling on this thread, there's lots of fruits, no pun intended, attached to it, right? If we create better awareness, we have better nutrition, we have better cognitive outcomes, we have better prospects for the farmers in the country, we have a better food processing industry, and there's so many different ways it can keep giving dividends. So I would encourage you to please look us up, aahaarkranti.org, and join us if you have any time. But in the least, think about these questions for yourself and your family. Thank you.
Ankurji, before I go, do you want to share the poll results? Very interesting. Good. We have to do a better job. So somewhat 25%, 23% has to be reduced to single digit. And we have to increase the last 37% to maybe 73%. We'll try. We'll try. Maybe Hindu University can hold more and more webinars, and we can move slowly but for surely in that direction. Okay. All right. So I want to leave a couple of messages to you. One, I want to share a message that Sadhguru mentioned about what is awareness and why a country like in India, awareness plays a significant role. So allow me to share my screen and let's see, it's here. Okay, let's see, everything set. Okay.
Suppose, hypothetical question, I must announce that before that. Suppose you were made the Prime Minister of this country for 1 month. How will you change things?
See, there are enough instruments in the democratic process. Making me or anybody a Prime Minister for 1 month is a cruel thing.
Okay, for 5 years. Yes. So you admit that 1 month is not sufficient?
No, because 1 month is a very cruel joke. It doesn't matter who comes to power for 1 month, he can't do anything in a nation as diverse as India. To get this nation moving, you need to understand this. You cannot move this nation with policy, with rules. You can only move this nation when anything that you want to achieve in this country, you make it a movement. If you do not make it a movement, if people do not emotionally connect to that, no rules, no policy is going to work in this country. It is only people who have been implanted from somewhere, who have not grown up with Indian people, who do not understand this. They think if you make a rule, everything is going to work. This is not Switzerland. If you announce on the notice board, everybody will follow. Here you have to make a movement out of it. You have to make people connect emotionally to what needs to be achieved. If you are not able to do that, nothing is ever going to happen.
So you can understand the significance of what the movement is. I think there was a question earlier, is it a government initiative or not? And Prafulji did answer, and I am reconfirming that this is not a government initiative. If it becomes government initiative, we all know that they can do only certain extent, but they cannot do to a larger extent. So what is our goal? I think earlier Prafulaji shared a spider chart. I'm going to share the spider chart once again because it has all that is required for us to take message for ourselves and probably take the message to rest of the world. And for us, the rest of the world is nothing other than the individuals, the families, and the friends and the acquaintances. They become aware of this one. So we have shared the path is that it is like a curriculum in the school, right? And the curriculum has to be familiarized with the teachers so that they can teach it to the students. And the students are the growing ones. They are going to ask questions to teachers as well as families so that they will have good understanding about nutrition, and therefore families may be encouraged to practice. And through families, it will percolate down into societies. Now, many times, many people ask, hey, my economic conditions is not that great. Hey, in my neighborhood, not the things what we want are available. They are available, but not to the extent what we need. That is why this awareness is required. And Prafulaji also nicely articulated about where we have begun. Our beginning is through teachers to students and students to families and families to the society. And today, our languages are English and Hindi. And the media, what we are using is the schools, either directly, NGOs, Anganwadis, and things like that. Now, the question is, what happens if we increase the awareness? Well, I know something in English and Hindi, other languages can be made applicable. I can be part of it. How can I communicate? I can use gamification. I can use different tools and materials, collaterals. Maybe it is an online format, all the physical or mobile first, something like that. But is it alone? Is it good enough? Probably not. The awareness has to influence and bring the changes, whether it is public sector or the government sector. I was talking to a couple of organizations who provide midday meal in Bharat. The assistance they get is about 4.5 rupees per child if they are in the first preschool or maybe early 1 to 3 grades, and 6 rupees when the grade is little above. Now you think of that in this economy, in this amount, what kind of nutrition they would be able to provide, we do not know. But we want to reach them, increase awareness about the importance of nutrition, starting from embryonic phase. We have started calling it as E to E, embryonic phase to end of our life. The pregnant woman, expecting mother, its diet is going to influence the growth of the child, including the mental and physical, especially the brain growth. If not, it is compromised. Lactating mother, anything that goes to the child is through the mother, and therefore the nutrition has to be at its best. If they are at best, then the cognitive skills, what is cognitive skill? It is nothing but presentation, use of our 5 senses. Our understanding will become better, means learning will be better. If the learning is better, it is reflected in the performance. It may be in our own life as a student, or maybe work, or maybe taking care of my own family later. Also, it is about my own performance in the team environment, my own performance in the social environment. So that is very, very important. And I think Rashmiji articulated about the onset of diseases. Any of these diseases, cardio, diabetes, kidney, these are time and again are proved due to the unbalanced or the malnutritioned body. How can we address it? It is not something that is answered today and it is going to be reflected tomorrow. No, they take decades. So what can we do? We have to do the ramping up of our health and maintaining it in that fashion. So the awareness is going to lead in the direction. Is it alone sufficient? Probably no. We talked about Krushi Pradhan. Krushi Pradhan happened, but it has to become balanced. How can we promote the system so that there's a balanced production between and consumption? how can we encourage less producing items, and how can we control overproducing items? That is what this awareness is going to bring in the field of agriculture. Same is with the health. We talked about earlier, I mentioned in the beginning that the National Institution of Standards are international. They talk about what to be taken, how much to be taken per day. But very little information is available when to be taken, what to be taken, how much per day. That is the beauty of Ayurveda. Obviously, this awareness means, as Kalyanji mentioned, the substantial investment that is required to conduct the studies. And these are the studies not to be done in a month or a 2 month or a decade, in a year. Some of these studies has to go a little long because Ayurveda is in the process of treating the disease, not treating, curing the disease, not just controlling the symptoms. The education, can they incorporate the in curriculum? Can the volunteers given sufficient amount of information so that they themselves can give the general ideas what was presented today? Again, the different school grades, you cannot use one level for everyone. One says does not fit at all. You have to use more images and less words in the early ages of schooling, and probably more wordings and less images later. And even later, probably engaging in conversation with the questions and answer. So all these things, so depending upon whether you are in the audience or in this, or the partner or the language or the content, you can be part of this one. The least that we can do is, if I have become a little bit aware about what is good and what is not good, can we practice in our life? And the people that are immediately around us, that is our family, our friends and relatives. At least that much we can do, we should do. With those few takeaway messages, the slogan is very simple, right, for today. Food is my friend. Let us have good friendship with our friend. Gut biome, microbiome is our friend. Let us have good friendship with them. And our own family member, friends, they're all our friends, like, isn't it? So we should take care of them. So with those few thoughts, I'll stop here. And one last thing I want to add is, thank you very much for Hindu University. Kalyanji and Ankurji, thank you very much. Appreciate your help. And namaste.
Namaste. Thank you. Dhanyawad to everyone. Thank you. Namaste.